Hello, my name's Jane Denning and I'm going to talk to you today and give you a very quick overview of the games that Medusa Games has to offer. So starting first of all with Nine Worlds over on my right, this is an area control type game. Players are starting on one of the 9 worlds of Norse mythology. Might be Midgard, the land of men, might be Asgard, home of the gods. One of the other places, Jotunheim, where the giants. And each player has an army of stones that they're going to use to try and conquer the 9 worlds, obtain the most points and win the game. It's a strategy game. You're spending action points in order to bring your stones on the board, to move your own pieces and those of your opponents around in order to maximise your influence, have as many of the world powers that each world possesses at your disposal, and create the most points. There are no dice to roll, there are no cards to draw, so no element of chance, but a considerable ability for player interaction and for one player to interfere with another. Moving on, we then have Great Fire. This was actually the first of the games that Medusa Games produced, based on the Great Fire of London in the 17th century, which was very destructive in terms of buildings, but did not produce a great deal of loss of life. And in the game, each player, it represents one of the wealthier landowners. They have 6 different coloured houses in the box. Each player has one colour which is theirs. They also have 3 of the more important places in London that they are also trying to protect. Everyone starts with a certain amount of points. You lose points for every one of your houses that are destroyed, and if any of those significant places are destroyed, you gain points for every fire cone that you manage to remove from the board. So on your turn, the player first chooses which direction the wind is going to go that turn. That determines which way the fire is going to move, and then you move the fire, burn down the houses, and then move around the other firemen and yourself in order to take off the fire cones. So it usually starts off as a semi-cooperative game, but ends up as every player for themselves. Now, when we first launched this game in 2010, there wasn't much call for 2-player games, but there was call for 5 and 6 player games, and so the base game plays from 3 to 6, but nowadays, even before the current situation, lots more people wanted to be able to play games in 2s, and so we do now have a 2-player expansion which fits with all the previous versions of the game, so that you can now burn down London in groups of 2 to 6 as you choose. Moving on, we then have Tailor. This is a lighter card game. It's something that can be played with younger families. There are words on the cards, but once the people know what each role does, you don't actually need to be able to read in order to successfully play the game. And my husband, who created the game, has certainly been beaten in demo matches before now by 7-year-olds. So it's something that you can play with the family, but there's also a reasonable amount of interaction again between the various roles. So in a 3-player game, first player has 5 of the 17 roles to choose from. They then pass the 4 cards to the next player, who picks one, and so on. So last player has a choice of 3, but no clue what's gone before, whereas first player knows all the potential roles, but not which ones are actually in the game. And that matters because there's a lot of interaction between them. So, for example, we have a thief, we have a pirate, and we have an outlaw who can all steal or take cards from players or from the market in a way that makes life difficult for the others. But there is also a jailer. Jailer's a bit of a boring role to have just for itself, but if there's also any of those others in the deck at the same time, then you get additional cards from those players. So it's not a difficult game, but there is a reasonable amount of going to make replayability there. And finally, we have Magnificent Flying Machines. This is at the opposite end of the spectrum to 9 Worlds. So it's about those early air races where in those days merely getting into a plane and attempting to take off was itself a feat of bravery and recklessness. So dangerous was air flight. And so those races were not just about how quickly could you get to the end, it was also about other things along the way. Best painted aircraft, how many of the original components that were on the starting line made it to the finishing line, could you be the first person to deliver a passenger to Manchester, all those sorts of elements within and they're all in the game as well. Also cards that you can play dirty tricks on the other players should you so wish. So there's dice to roll, there's luck involved, although there's a lot of ways to mitigate it. But then again, in those early days of air races, really, luck was the main thing that anybody required. So that's our games, and happy playing.